Good morning and welcome to White Rock United Methodist Church. I'm Reverend Phil Dickey and you are here at the Sunday Sit Down. I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to come and join us here for the Sit Down. This is a really special week. We have a guest speaker for the Sit Down. We also have a guest preacher this week, and we're really excited. We've been doing some work for quite a while, and the Hancocks have been a part of our church for a long time, but it's going to be a special treat to get Justin up here to have this conversation. If you're new to White Rock this morning, well, welcome, first of all. This is not what church usually looks like, right? It doesn't usually look like a person sitting in a chair like this and you being on the other side of the screen. We recognize that this is a little bit of a strange time, but we're also really grateful for the opportunity to connect, even if it is via Facebook or if you're with us on YouTube, whatever the case may be. We're grateful for the opportunity to share time. When we can't share physical space, we still have the chance to share time, and for that, we just give great thanks and praise. So grateful for that, for the opportunity to have such wonderful conversations and to share together in corporate worship and to pray together and just to be together as one people and one body, working toward one goal, hopefully to build beloved community. And so with that said, I'm really thrilled to have Justin Hancock with me this morning, the Reverend Justin Hancock. And so, Justin, thanks for being with us this morning.
It's really a pleasure to be here, and I've got to give a shout out to the whole crew if I can real quick. The mark of a good setup like this is if you're at home, you never know, and I'm kind of amazed at what all of this takes, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. So I'm so delighted to be here this morning.
Well, thank you for that. We try to brag on Dexter as much as possible. He's the one that makes the magic work behind the scenes. And if you follow us on Instagram, every once in a while I'll snap a photo of kind of behind the scenes. It looks like Mission Central back there with everything going on. So it's pretty incredible, and that's a great word. Thanks for that appreciation. So Justin, you're joining us today. We're going to do a lot of talking today about the Julian Way, which you're going to hear more about, both in the sit down but also in worship as well. But as I was reading through your website, I came across this term, diverse embodiments, and I thought, I think I can get to an understanding of what that means because I'm a nerd, I study theology too much, and I spent too much time at Perkins. Justin and I both are graduates from Perkins School of Theology here in Dallas at SMU. We actually just missed each other. He was finishing right as I started, but I always assumed that I was there with people because I took a very long time to finish seminary. That's another conversation. But diverse embodiments, will you just give us a little bit of a background and an understanding of what diverse embodiments means?
Sure. So the Julian Way is a ministry based around education and empowerment with, for, and by those with disabilities. And as Lisa and I were praying and dreaming about what the Julian Way could be, we knew we wanted to use, and we knew we couldn't really avoid using the phraseology and the term around disability, but we also believe, as is kind of clear by the Julian Way and one of Julian of Norwich's primary teachings, that all of God's creation is God's good creation. Therefore, we believe that what have classically been considered disabilities are marks of God's creativity and diversity rather than being a lack or a blemish or something we're missing.
Yeah.
So we like to use the phrase diverse embodiments because there's all sorts of diversity all around, not only in the disability community, but in every facet of life and creation. So diverse embodiment allows us to just sort of bring in a much broader and more creative sweep when we talk about the ways that people navigate through and encounter life together.
So you joined us on the podcast, the Day After Sunday podcast, a couple weeks ago, and we talked a little bit about just terminology in general.
Sure.
I would love to just spend a little bit of time because I don't want to take up all the time talking about terminology because there's more to get to here. But
absolutely,
you had a really great word in there that you said. Some people just use different terminology, and there's some that may be more right than others, right?
Yes.
But the terminology also changes over time, right? Can you
Yes.
just, we've had a lot of conversations around race in here, and a lot of times people are afraid just to use the wrong terms, and they don't want to offend people. Can you give us a little bit of that background on the evolution of terminology and where you have come to land on the terminology you use?
Yes, I will do my best,
Sure.
knowing that a lot of this is imprecise, and even though I am knee deep in the middle of it, you can get sort of myopic in your own area, so I'll do my best.
Sure.
But really, my thought on terminology and down through the years, it has shifted a lot. Back in the uh, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and really through the early to mid 20th century, you saw a lot of the use of, frankly, crippled or handicapped was about the best you got
Yeah.
in the pre-ADA era. And now we have moved largely to talking about special needs or disabled or differently abled is one that is popular in the vernacular right now. But I think what's important to note about terminology, and I'll say this, I may touch on this in my sermon, one of the questions that I primarily get when I'm talking to congregations about this is, what do we call you? And I'm always like, well, that varies so wildly depending on the individual that the number one thing is not what you call me, it's ask the person first.
Yeah.
Let the person with the disability or diverse embodiment lead the conversation. For example, for me, and I know this is going to be hard for some folks, I come from the generation that was post-ADA and is much more in the activist and advancing the ball down the field generation. So I like to reclaim the word crippled. I like to own it. It's my word. It's not ambiguous. It lets me own my situation. Now I realize that for some folks that word carries baggage upon baggage upon baggage.
Yeah.
So even when I'm leading conversations within the disability community, I'm very aware of how I use that word,
Yeah.
of prefacing when I use that word. So number one is terminology can vary, but always let the person make it a person-centric conversation.
Yeah, that's great. There's an empowerment piece just in the simplicity of asking, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, the other thing I really am curious about is you mentioned Julian of Norwich, right? And obviously the Julian Way, I assume, is based from Julian of Norwich. Can you give us a little bit of background on why you chose Julian and what led you down this path of really following and creating the Julian Way based on Julian of Norwich?
Yes, and before I do that, I'm going to say I always get the date wrong about the century in which Julian of Norwich lived. My wife, Lisa, is on me about that all the time, so we're going to sweep that off the table.
No fact-checking this morning, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
So the reason we are so inspired and led by the teaching and the mindset of Julian of Norwich is in her main work, Revelations of Divine Love. She had, I think, 16 or 17 visions around the wounded body of Christ while she was very ill and on the verge of death. And that was her main sort of theological treatise. And the more my wife and I studied Julian of Norwich, the more she came to symbolize to us somebody that took into account the large sweep of God's creation, and like I said earlier, the diversity of God's creation. Not only did she say that phrase I've already quoted, I think once, all of God's creation is God's good creation.
You can keep quoting that over and over again, right?
Absolutely. It's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
She did so much work around the beauty of a wounded Christ and the power contained within the wounds of Christ, that for us, when we talk about disability, it allows us to go into this whole discussion about what does it mean that there is God-given power in the fragility of human embodiment, even for the Savior.
Yeah.
And how can we use that to speak to folks of all different embodiments, classically able-bodied, classically disabled. And my wife has actually done a lot. Her PhD is on Christology and disability. So that's, Julian is just sort of pleasantly haunted our work all the way through.
Pleasantly haunted. That is a great phrase there. I love that.
Yeah. So that's the Julian way, and it's really about embodying that spirit that lets all different embodiments have a seat at the table and a place in the conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little more. What are your hopes and dreams, and what led you to starting this ministry? And are you hoping to really work with churches to partner? And is it beyond churches, right? Are there nonprofits or schools, or what are your hopes and dreams for the Julian Way?
So, and I'll give you like the 30-second pitch because I know we're kind of short on time, but the original goal of the Julian Way was to create a place of empowerment where we could come in and partner with churches and partner with those that we are discipling, the individuals mostly with special needs that we're discipling, so that we can teach churches how to have conversations around disability and diverse embodiment that allow persons with disabilities to be integrated within the leadership structure of the church. Because since 1990, I mean, in most churches, we can get in the door. It's not anywhere where it needs to be, but you know, it's no longer for us about getting in the door. It's about creating spaces for all different embodiments to be in leadership and influence the power structure of the churches and the places where we inhabit. Now moving forward in this sort of newer, broader interpretation of the Julian Way we've started on, we now want to be a cultural leader for disability conversations and empower not only churches, but nonprofits, for-profit corporations, and really be a leader nationwide and globally about how do we empower persons with special needs or disabilities to have a wide and pervasive impact in whatever stratus of leadership they choose to inhabit. So
That's incredible. So for people who are watching now, who are going to watch later, listen on this goes up on our podcast stream as well. Where can they go to find the work that you're doing? Where's the best place for them to find you?
So we are now partnered with a new nonprofit for us, the Neighboring Movement out of Wichita, Kansas. we thought they were a great fit, building off of the great work we did with the Missional Wisdom Foundation for 7 years. And the neighboring movement does really neighborhood-based, asset-based community development. But we are working with them, and on their website, we actually have our own website, thejulianway.org.
Okay.
You can find video blogs that we do about concepts around disability theology, around current events that are impacted by disability, or teachings that we do. So go to thejulianway.org.
Great.
Find a place that there's a place to donate to our work, and we're developing curriculums and studies all the time, so we've got new stuff about to come off the presses we're very excited about, and we're so glad that White Rock is along for the ride.
Well, we are grateful to be a part and to form this covenant, which we'll talk about more during worship. Justin, thank you for joining us this morning. Again, if you are on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're listening to this on the podcast later, please go check out thejulianway.org. We'll also have some links on our website, wrumc.org/JulianWay. We would love for you to check that as well. And there's a place you can donate and be a part of this covenant that we're going to have with the Julian Way. We're really grateful that you've taken the time to come and sit with us and join Justin and I. You have a couple minutes before worship starts, but more than anything, again, just thanks so much for this opportunity, for this time. We're grateful to be part of the beloved community together. So go forth and have a wonderful day.